And I also wanted to get into one of the more controversial topics that I know that you like to talk about, and that's the issue of men's circumcision. So it's interesting to me because when if anybody says female circumcision, for the most part, it is politically correct to go, like we do that. We're like, oh, that's a bad thing. We immediately decide female circumcision, bad thing. The U.S. has actually written mandates to other countries telling them they should cease female circumcision practices, right? And for the most part, and I'm not saying I disagree with this, but politically, socially, we all start going, well, that's absolutely correct. No female circumcision, this is bad. And you talk about male circumcision, and most people go, yeah, how is that controversial? Men get circumcised.
You're right on.
So I think,
to me, it's a human rights issue, and it's not about separating one sex from the other sex and making one person's genitalia more important or different than the other person's. To me, we're human beings, and the rights to our bodies should be our rights. And when you're being circumcised, whether you're male or female, and you're aren't able to consent, and you're underage, or even if you're an infant, to me that's kind of an issue. It's one thing if you're 18 or an adult, depending on the maturity level of 16 or 15 or whatnot, to be able to say, okay, well, I'm old enough, wise enough, mature enough, I can make the decision for me to do what I want to do to my body, and that's perfectly understandable. You do whatever you like, but for me, the difficult part is the discrepancy that we have that values the female's genitalia in a different way than the male's genitalia. And even with the terms we use FGM for females. So female circumcision is often referred to as female genital mutilation. And there's nothing, people take that in stride. They don't necessarily challenge that. They just accept it as FGM. But if you said MGM, male genital mutilation, people get a little upset. Why is that male genital mutilation? And that's not, that's such an inflammatory term. And I do agree that both are inflammatory terms, but hey, this is our body. I mean, if people are going to chop off something of mine, I might get a little inflamed, whether I'm a guy or a girl. So I understand where the people are coming from. And you'll find, too, that there are different reasons why people do it, the traditional, the cultural, the religious pieces. Some do it for the medical aspects, and that's the piece where I'm mostly, the medical and the sexological is where I have more of a difficulty with it, because I understand why Jews or Muslims circumcise their children. They're both their men and their women. It's part of their culture. It's written within their belief systems. But
you don't have to agree with it, but it's understandable why you would do that.
Right, exactly. You can understand it. But then when I start hearing about people wanting to circumcise young boys because it's supposed to help with penile cancer or urinary tract infections or STIs, or even masturbation, that was another one too as well. And over the course of time, these circumcision myths, which is what I call them, have been disproven over time. But you'll find that people still hold on to the myth and hold on to that belief system. We had the majority of doctors in America from the 1800s to the 1900s were Jewish doctors. And so within the Jewish religion, it was customary to circumcise, with the bris and with the cultural beliefs. So therefore, they were recommending it to their the children that were being born within their patients. And so you'll find that there's a lot of influence throughout the course of time, a lot of writings with no research background or evidence saying that the circumcision was necessary to prevent insanity or to prevent masturbation or to prevent hypersexuality. The circumcision was necessary to prevent, penile cancer was one. And, when we look at the rates of penile cancer between circumcised men and uncircumcised men, the difference is circumcised men get penile cancer at about 1 in 100,000 men. That's the rate. For uncircumcised, it's about 2 in 100,000. So you might say, well, it's double the rate. Or you could say it's really a small difference when you look at the actual statistics.
Right.
And you could also say, well, what about the other factors and the variables? And what we've done with different research in trying to factor out some of these variables and factors is we find that cigarette smoking, HPV, and poverty or poor hygiene are much higher associated with penile cancer than circumcision is. So it's unfortunate that they've promoted this myth. And you can keep going on and on. I mean, the current mode of thought is that circumcision will reduce HIV transmission. Which, what I always tell people is,
Yeah. There's no. Okay, go ahead.
I always say, there's this little door right here to the body. It's called your urethral opening, your pee hole. I mean, HIV is going to go right through there if it chooses to, if it wants to, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, inside. What the research is, what they're trying to say or promote is that when the foreskin is retracted back, that the HIV will be on the penis, and then it comes forward and it'll stay inside
there.
Which simple cleaning cleans off the infections.
And if it's there, it's there.
Exactly.
Foreskin or no.
And, the trials that they did also in Africa and also in India, there were some cognitive factors that were not really talked about. For instance, the amount of time that the people were doing these research projects. They would take a 2-year study, and they would take circumcised men and uncircumcised men, but they would basically cut the men, so they'd have to wait 2 months, 2 to 3 months for their penis to heal before they can start having sex again. And these other men who are uncircumcised are having sex for 2 to 3 months. They also never, so we already have different times. Then they cut the study short because they said, well, these men are getting higher rates of HIV and it's unethical for us to continue this, so we're going to give them meds right away. So the study went from 2 years down to about 1.25 years, plus the time that they were healing.
But half of the subjects are really only doing this for 2/3 of the time. Right.
And they didn't take into consideration the cultural factors. Some monogamous individuals within, some have polygamous perspectives. Others had use of prostitutes. Others were able to have different lives and with fear of death based on if anybody would cheat outside of their relationship. So they had all these different factors that they weren't being controlled for. So.
Right.
And the rates
of bad science.
Bad science, and there was even one study that said that the rate of homosexuality amongst the men checking it off was at 0.2%, which in just about every society it's usually around 2 to 3%. So that's a real interesting piece right there.
Did you put the decimal in the wrong place, or?
Yeah. And a lot of the men also too were getting paid to be circumcised too. So now you have other aspects that I think are variables. So. And then there's the sensitivity piece for circumcision. A lot of people don't realize that there's a British Journal of Urology study in 2009 that found that the 5 most sensitive areas of the male penis were all found on the foreskin in this area called the ridge band. So the first 5 for uncircumcised men were on the foreskin. The number 1 spot on a circumcised male was actually...
It's the frenulum, right?
Well, we call it the frenulum, but it's actually the scar where the
circumcision happened.
Exactly. So it's where the foreskin, the leftover foreskin is.
Right.
And so we also know that within foreskin, when we do testing, that the foreskin has the highest concentration of Meissner corpuscle nerve endings, which are the most sensitive nerve endings we have. And when you get that, when that foreskin has all those sensitive nerve endings, and you get that erection, and it spreads out amongst your penile shaft, you have all these fantastic nerve endings that are being cut off, that aren't being spread about your penis. So you're losing sensitivity as well. So there's a number of factors that...
So then maybe the loss of sensitivity that some men say they have when using a condom might get counteracted if they have a foreskin.
It's possible. For us to look at that and try to prove that, we'd have to have men who are uncircumcised use condoms, rate their sensitivity, maybe even do electrostim tests with condoms on, and then circumcise them.
We can't do this test, but I think it would be interesting to find out.
But I think that you'd have most men say, I lost sensitivity. And most men who have talked about adult circumcision will say, oh man, I lost a lot of sensitivity. I wish I could go back. I wish I could have that back. And a lot of men will circumcise, not so much for the health reasons, but for the look. 85% of the world is uncircumcised, but in our country, the majority of our country is circumcised.
85%.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Is circumcised.
But the good news is that last year, 33% of babies male infants were circumcised. So now I think the tables are turning. People are realizing that it's not necessary, and even the American Academy of Pediatrics doesn't recommend routine circumcision.
Yeah, because I even remember when I was pregnant, and I didn't know if I was going to have a boy or a girl, and I remember talking to my doctor and saying, so give me the pros and cons of circumcision. And this was 1991, and he kind of looked at me like, what do you mean? you get them circumcised. What if I don't want to? I get to make that choice, right? I'm a parent. You don't get to make that choice. You're the doctor. I'm paying you. So tell me what. And so he tried to do, tell me, oh, there's all these health benefits to being circumcised and blah, 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 and all of this stuff. And then I went and did reading on my own and went, no, actually my reading is telling me it's a toss, it's like there aren't necessarily health benefits. It's just a matter of.
What I find too with doctors is that they go through medical school, they get the training, they get very little sexuality training. I mean,
Yes,
we're talking just a few hours.
And this even gynecologists, urologists, people who are actually working with reproductive organs get very little sex training.
And they usually don't add to their sexual training after they finish up with school, because most of the time they're focusing on their professions, their professional paths that they're taking, and they don't go back to get more sexological information. So the information is limited, it's usually old, and it's often not updated.
Yeah.
I rarely see doctors who have the updated research on sexual pleasure aspects. They know a lot about the up and coming STI research, the reproductive health research, but not so much about pleasure and aspects of sociological aspects of sexuality, like behaviors and to us it's exactly. To us, it's something that we talk about on a daily basis, and for them, it's this. What do you mean? There's this open-minded community of adults who get on the internet and have sex with multiple partners. Like, to them, it's a shocking sociological phenomenon. When for us, it's like this has been happening for so long.
How did you not see this? Let's dispel some of those myths about whether male circumcision is more healthy.
With people who do not clean themselves, I can understand that circumcision would be something that could prevent some infection. It's very true. But those who have the ability to take, daily showers or daily baths, those who have any type of hygiene behavior, don't need to have circumcision. We, in my opinion, we don't have enough evidence that there is true medical benefits. So from that perspective, I don't feel like circumcision is something we should recommend or even have, unless there's some type of issue with the foreskin. And there are some select people who go through struggles and issues like something called phimosis, which is the retraction of the foreskin is painful and not able to get past the glands of the penis, and that's a medical issue. That's understandable. But in most cases of phimosis, even though there's just a few percent of children who have this past age 4, it doesn't have to be a full circumcision.
Right.
They just do a small dorsal slit, and usually that
open it up a little bit.
Yeah, they just barely open it up, and it's usually enough for the entire head to go through. For those who are religious or from a cultural perspective, this is a struggle because I really don't have the answer. Do we respect the cultures of other people who have been doing this traditionally? Who are we as Westerners to say, well, you can't do that because we don't, and we think that's wrong, and that's not humane? Vice versa, when they come from their cultures and tell us that we're doing things wrong and inhumane, like our methods of sexual education, which I view as child abuse, the way we educate our kids about sex.
Yeah.
We're not taking their opinions or their recommendations, so there is kind of a mutual dissension that occurs with outside influence. You go to Holland or Germany or Sweden, and the sex education there is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's so open-minded. These kids come out with such fantastic perspectives of sexuality and have much healthier relationships, lower STIs, lower abortion rates, lower teen pregnancy rates,
Lower sexual assault rates.
very low sexual assault rates,
Yeah.
very low sexual abuse rates, very low. They use contraceptions at higher rates. I mean, all these positives that we say, well, because it's from another country, we're not doing it. The same thing goes with.
They can't be right. They're not us.
They're Dutch. What do they know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do they know? They just have the red light district, smoke shops, legal drug use, prostitution. I mean, all the
And the lowest rate of crime.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone's smiling. Damn these people.
How dare they be happy?
They're so happy. It's irritating.
If we were actually happy and felt in control of our lives, we might actually, do something about other aspects of what's going on around us. If all of our other needs are being met. My gosh, what would happen then?
To piggyback something we talked about also about, I'm sorry to go back to circumcision, there's actually a couple cities on the West Coast that are actually working towards making circumcision illegal. So we've got San Francisco, and we also have Santa Monica, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, that are both fighting to get circumcision banned in those cities. So that's causing a huge uproar amongst the communities.
All circumcision?
All circumcision for men before the age of 18.